Good morning. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Sunday, May 10th, 2020, 9:30 a.m. Central in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. We're going to do this Sunday rules retrospective on 1E AD&D combat. This will be part one. This will be kind of an ongoing thing. We'll look at combat over multiple shows and revisit it from time to time. It's obviously one of the more complex parts of first edition D&D, and indeed one of the more complex parts of any role-playing game or war game for that matter, because it's at the very heart of it. It's the thing you need rules for. Whenever they try to add role-playing rules into a role-playing game, I'm often at odds with that design philosophy, because personally believe you're just using rules for things you can't express verbally at a table. And I know people say, well, I have no ability to talk to other people, and I need to be able to roll to say I'm socializing. But I don't know. I think people get better at stuff as they try it more. I think that part of what role-playing games are good at is helping people to learn to socialize with one another. And of course, as long as your intent's there and you have a DM who is aware of who the players are and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and can help them to navigate those difficulties, as it is a DM's job to do just that in all areas when people are around a DM's table, then that kind of stuff works out just fine. And it's important to do all of this with an eye toward having fun, and know that while there is some excitement around rolling the dice, the fun of the game comes from people being there and making sure people are there and they're comfortable and they're having a good time is the most important part. So, we're looking at AD&D 1E First Edition, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Today I thought we'd take a look at a document that's been around for nearly a decade and a half. It is called the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Initiative and Combat Table. It was compiled by David M. Prata. I want to say Prata, and maybe it's Prata. But, of course, the little child in me immediately wants to know if there's any Prata or Rata. Or is it a Rata? So for the longest time, when I saw it discussed that this fellow was working on this, I only saw the name DM Prata. I never saw his first name and middle initial, and wasn't aware. Now I'm sure he's playing that up and doing that, using it as both. It's a double entendre for him, a perfect gaming double entendre, and well deserved too, because what he does here with this document is meticulously detail all of the material that leads to what defines encounters, combat, and initiative in first edition. And I think it's worth pointing out too that First edition is what he's into here. Dungeon Master's Guide, Player's Handbook, Monster Manual 2 is included for some stuff. 9 footnotes on the first page. We'll keep scrolling down through the document just to give a sort of overview here. We're on page 6, and we've got 94 footnotes already. We got some examples, which is good to have, right? 170 footnotes by page 11. He's very much detailing. Unearthed Arcana is in here in a couple of spots, although as I recall, he hesitated to use that. Wilderness Survival Guide, one of the lesser known first edition books. I hesitate to say core, but they consider it part of the Big 12. What does that include? Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Guide are 3, of course. Unearthed Arcana, Deities and Demigods, 2 more. That brings us up to 5. We've got Fiend Folio and Monster Manual 2. That gets up to 7. The 2 survival guides gets us up to 9. And yeah, I'm going to have to double check. Make sure I'm getting all the right ones here. List of Dungeons and Dragons books. Oh, well, see, that was... Bum, 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 bum. Wonder if anyone's in the chat this morning. I don't see anyone in there. I'm just going to give it a quick howdy. There we go. Okay. Yep, that's all going all right. Ah, Lost Nomad. How you doing there, buddy? I'm just looking up something real quick here. Go over to our friends on... There we go. All right. Folio. Somebody... Legends and Lore, I guess. Manual of the Plains, some people add that in. I don't use that myself. Oriental Adventures, some people use that. I don't use that myself either. So those 3 on top of the other 9 are the canonical books of first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. But the main 9, I use those, and I barely use the survival guides. But it's worth noting that they are part of the footnotes here. 239 footnotes, Wilderness Survival Guide there, in this 1E AD&D Initiative and Combat Table 2.2 from 2006. This is a pretty good graphic. Tide roll D6. Follows the next 2 pages a pair of charts, useful as a graphic tool for comparing which of 2 actions occurs first in a round. So when you've got tide initiative rolls, Some people re-roll those, but there's a lot of factors that affect that, and it's not the same from player to player within a group. So if you re-roll your ignoring um, initiative bonuses and stuff like that, and that's okay. You don't have to use everything that's in the game, and whatever makes it work for your group at the table is important, is paramount, because if people aren't coming back to your table, you're not going to be able to get to play, and that's a crying shame. So if we look at this table here, this details multiple attack routines. So this is mostly with higher level combatants, fighters in particular, fighter and fighter subclasses, but also can be affected by haste spells, things like that. That was a funny little Dave Sutherland. Hey, Gary, there's some guys here with questions about D&D. Bah, the rules are simple and precise. And he's pressing a button. It's a panic button. I don't know why. Stormberg. Funny guy. So here's a list of the sources. Rogues Gallery, TSR 1980. So there was some details in there that were snagged from the Sorcerer's Scroll. May 80. Part of Dragon Magazine. We got the Dungeon Master's Guide and Monster Manuals 2, Player's Handbook, Unearthed Arcana. We've got Under the Dragons from Holmes. So some clarification was taken from Basic, or the Holmes box set. Not really Basic, more of a starter set, really, right? I guess some people do call it Basic, but Temple of Elemental Evil. Some stuff detailed in there. Surprise Dragon Magazine article. Mordenkainen's Fantastic Adventure from 84. 85. I guess 85 is probably the last. 86. Here we go. That's right. Wilderness Survival Guide. So nothing needed to be pulled from the couple of Earth Journal. Bonehill Adventure. Another Dragon Magazine article. Nothing needed to be pulled from the Dungeoneer's Survival Guide, which is interesting. Prometheus Bound, Zerathon, and on. Lex Fire 22, good morning. How is everybody? Thanks for popping in. Just doing a little discussion about the D&D combat using DM Prata's 2006 combat document. I've just kind of given an overview of what's in it and how it's used. There's a good number of examples in there, as you can see by the colored text. Pages are not long, but taking it from the top, we got a little bit of time left, so let's dive into it. Unless anybody has some questions. Rainy day, Lexfire. Where are you located that you're getting some rain? It rained last night here in Lake Geneva, but it seems to have cleared up this morning. Chase the kids out the front door in their raincoats. That's good. They don't dissolve in rain, I don't think. Northwest of Chicago. Nice. Up in Games Plus country, right? Or are you much further northwest? Oh, yeah. Raining in Burlington now, huh? Okay. It's a meager 10-minute drive from here. I'll tell you too, before they put the extra lights and the roundabouts and all that other stuff in, leaving town to the northeast when I used to be off on Saturdays and I would go to the Plymouth UCC game day every third Saturday being run by Kifley Scott and Steve Sullivan. I could leave my place a couple blocks north of the library in Lake Geneva, hit a couple of stop signs, and if I did not hit the light by next door pub or in front of the Piggly Wiggly, I could get all the way over to Burlington in all of 10 minutes. Actually, pretty fast drive over on 36 without speeding, really. I don't know, 1 or 2 miles per hour, maybe, right? Still in Cook? Oh, okay. Cook County, nice and close. Bingo, McHenry County, yep. Are you as far out as Rockford, or, and if so, did you used to get to RockCon back in the day before Gamehole Con kind of took over that last couple of months of the calendar? Imagine Theater. Oh, yeah, yeah. Right. You brought the poster into Games Plus for me to put up back when you were first hiring, yeah? Back in the day, a couple years ago. Right on. Yeah, we have a lot of our gamers working there for a long time. I think Anthony was probably the most recent gamer acquisition into the ranks over there. I'm looking for a chart here. Oh, can't find it. Gonna have to move these around on my desktop so I can try to get to something here. Pardon me for a minute if I seem distracted. I'm just slightly confused. Okay. Now we got that. We got the links, hashtags. Trying to find my list. My entire desktop got jumbled around when I went to the trouble of unlocking my taskbar at the bottom of the screen, and it screwed up all of my desktop icons. I moved them around on me, which was a pain in the butt. Not a super big deal, but just made it so that I lost a few things. I want to make sure I get... Alright, Daniel. I want to add you up into a week 7 drawing. We're going to be doing the last dice set. We'll announce who won that in the giveaway tomorrow. But for those of you that are here, just want to let you know that you're all, as long as you're Elizabeth Loomer, yeah. Brandon Schramm, yep. Scott Hauser, one of my faves. Make sure, if you haven't already, to follow the channel, because we do a weekly drawing for a giveaway, and to qualify for it, all you need to do is follow the channel, and then at some time during a live stream, just speak up in chat, and you're all doing that now. So as long as you're doing it anyway, you might as well take the chance to win something. If it's if you're in the 48 contiguous states, I'll just ship it to you myself. And if you're outside of the 48, I'll ask for some help with shipping, but all of you are fairly local, actually. So the last dice set is gone, but for those of you who like a little old school gaming, we've got some patches from Thaddeus Moore in the offing. I can show you two of them. There's a third one with a sword, but they're old school patches, OSR, old school Renaissance. We've got the regular one with the old Moon Man, and then of course the blue one with the dungeon design. And then there's another one with a sword, which is really neat too. Kind of a Conan the Barbarian kind of sword thing going on. And those will be this week 7 giveaway. So you're all entered for that. And I thank you very much for following and then jumping in on the chat. To pop back over and discuss a bit about the topic of the day. Encounters combat initiative. Determine if either or both parties are surprised. So you roll a d6 for both parties, right? A 1 or 2 indicates surprise. Some individuals, notably rangers, are surprised less often. This is key, I think, personally. If a group is going to have what I like to refer to as the Dragon's 4 basic food groups, which is healer, skill-based like a thief, a fighter type, and a magic user type, a mage, then if you add one more, a ranger's almost always the first thing worth adding because of things like this. Being able to have the amount of times you're surprised, right? A 1 in 6 instead of a 1 or a 2 in 6 is huge for preventing a lot of character deaths in combat. And don't forget, this also helps for surprising others, and if something is surprised, it's easier to make that decision to just walk away, right? I'm not talking about necessarily running away, but avoiding combat in cases where it seems crazy tough. I remember when we used to do just random stuff using the old outdoor survival map, and you'd roll up, an ancient dragon flying overhead. And yeah, you were rolling to try to hide down on the ground, because if that thing decided it was going to come down and make a snack of you, it's new character rolling time. And sometimes that would happen quite early in your adventuring career in OD&D. First edition, tables are a little less dangerous, although outdoors, the further you are away from an urban environment, the more dangerous it gets very quickly. Unlike dungeons, which are often set up where levels match levels more or less, and it gets tougher the further down you go. You can go not too distant from a city in a Borderland kingdom, and you're running into stuff that'll just rip your face right off. And sure, it's fun to roll up new characters when you have to, but it doesn't mean you have to rush to it. Let's see, Alexfire says, we were playing 2E on Fantasy Grounds last night, and the ranger decided to back out in the high grass with his dog when they surprised some foes. Yeah, no doubt. If you've only got other things like that with you, if you have a trained dog with you, you can probably forego the, I don't want to say penalty. Rangers alone can surprise things more often, and that's section 2 here, right? So, in regard to the party being surprised, having a ranger lessens it. It's a 1 in 6 instead of a 1 or 2 in 6. Whether you have one ranger or 5 rangers, if you have one ranger with 5 other characters, doesn't matter. As long as a ranger is there, that is in effect. However, the opposite's not true. Rangers can surprise things more often, but it does not accrue to the entire party. So if I've got a magic user, a couple of fighters, whatever, walking around with this ranger, you don't get that surprise benefit. If you have 2 rangers together, then that can help you. My face-to-face group was running with 8 players, and when they would do scouting, they would often send out 2 scouting parties to pincer maneuver an area if they needed to circumnavigate it. Um, and around one way they would send a druid and a ranger, and they had 2 rangers in the group. Around the other way they would send a thief and a ranger. And I kept thinking to myself, if they just sent 2 rangers around one way, they'd have that surprise advantage. Or if they sent the rangers out alone, either has its own dangers. Sending any character out alone is more dangerous than the buddy system, right? And there's something to be said for having a thief who can do some moves silently and stuff, but doesn't have that ranger bonus, doesn't have that surprise bonus. Um, the druid knows the outdoors, and that was great because this is where they used to do this most often, would send out these 2 scouting parties in an outdoor situation to go around both sides of, let's say, a tower or a ruins location and just make sure there wasn't anything wandering around nearby. It was great having a druid out there, but you don't get the surprise if you got the druid with you. Number 3 on this list, where either side uses a die other than a d6 to determine surprise, convert to percentages. So there are certain creatures that are surprised on a 1 in 8, for instance, and in your head, you get used to just doing these percentages on the fly quickly. This is, if you look over to the right, Dungeon Tomb. This is DM Prata's 1E AD&D Initiative and Combat Table 2.2. And I'll just real quick go to the top because we're not that far from it. This is compiled in this version 2.2, compiled in March of 2006. He worked on this for several years. It uses, and I showed it earlier, but let's do a quick down to the sources. We've got Player's Handbook, Monster Manual 2, Dungeon Master's Guide, Unearthed Arcana. We've got several Dragon Magazine articles, a few other lesser known, the Earth Journals. We've got Wilderness Survival Guide as well. So we've got all the main books from first edition being used and all diligently footnoted in here as to where they come from, where all the details of all of this comes from. This is without a doubt the single most detailed breakdown of how surprise, initiative, and combat and physical encounters happen in first edition AD&D. And it's pretty easy to go through because things like this skip you ahead, right? There's a lot of things in here that simply don't happen in combat most of the time. So if I roll for surprise for both parties when there are two groups, let's say an adventure group and a monster group encountering one another, if neither is surprised, we just skip right ahead to step 2, and the rest of this doesn't make any difference. If either or both are surprised, then you have to use the result of that d6 to determine how long they're surprised. So, if a group has a ranger and they roll a 1, they are surprised, and you use that one pip. Yeah, we're talking in 1 pip per number on the die, right? Use that 1 pip to affect the length of time that they're surprised. If a group is surprised on a 1 and 3 on a 6-sided die because, let's say, 3 rangers are sneaking up on them, then you roll the 3. They'll be surprised for 3 segments. In cases where percentages are used, divide the result by the D percentage and rolling 16 2/3, rounding all fractions up to determine the number of segments lost. Again, don't get hung up on this. Just know that if and when this does come up, you can just make a quick call on the percentage, right? 16 2/3%, fractions rounded up, so 17% is a 1 on a 6-sided die, right? So these are numbers you get used to kind of, I don't want to say fudging, estimating better, because we're not changing anything, we're just estimating on the quick as gameplay goes. If only one side was surprised, then it will be inactive for the indicated number of segments. Hey. So we roll surprise for Mark. What? Standing and staring, looking, whatever, or just unaware. Although, thinking about it, I suppose being surprised actually suggests awareness, right? How can I be surprised? We're not being caught unaware. We're actually aware at the moment. We're just surprised and thus inactive, unable to respond. But aware, it seems to imply, right? I don't know. I think I need to read the actual text in the DMG between now and next week and make a determination about that. I hadn't really thought of it that way before, so I can't say off the top of my head what the text will tell us, but I'll look it up later. If only one side was surprised, then it will be inactive for the indicated number of segments. Inactive. Doesn't say unaware. Again, this is an interpretation, though, so this is not verbatim how it was expressed semantically in the original source material. If both sides are surprised, subtract the lesser result from the greater to determine the net amount of segments lost to the more surprised side. So if I'm surprised on a 1 and the group we are encountering is surprised on a 2, then my 1 disappears and they go to a 1. The difference between, right? Easy enough. Characters with dexterity reaction adjustments are individually surprised for more or less segments than the rest of the side, depending on the amount of the penalty or bonus. So, We know that the dexterity of these rangers are pretty good just because we're saying they are. And if I go in here and look at the dexterity chart and look at the reaction attacking adjustment table, and let's say all three of these rangers have a 16, so they all get a +1. Well, that's good because that affects where they are based on having lost a point and now regaining a point. And let's say just one of them has a 16 and the other two have a 15. Well, only one gets that adjustment. So this only applies when the character's side is already surprised. The reaction penalty does not create surprise in an unsurprised individual. Yeah, let's go back to that table real quick and say that in the case of a rather low dexterity, let's say a character has a 6 dexterity, which gives a +1. If they were surprised, that +1 applies. If they weren't, they don't go to a 1. They don't have a slower reaction because of that. It slows a reaction that's already inclusive of being surprised. I'd say the time between becoming aware and being able to take action. Yeah, regarding inactive, yeah. Definitely a good way to adjudicate that. Since Tensor has a 16 dexterity, okay, well, we basically were looking at that. We'll go to 6. A surprised character armed with a crossbow of speed can fire it in the second segment of surprise if he is surprised for more than one segment. Okay, so because of the effect that a crossbow of speed and of course that is not one that is part of the original DMG treasure. I won't be digging through other tomes for that. I just had that to hand, so I thought I'd take a quick look. But we can move on. That's pretty self-explanatory that weapons that react in the way that a dexterity adjusts reaction can also affect when you're getting to utilize those during initial combat. During each segment of surprise, members of the non-surprise side can perform one of the following actions. Make a full round of melee attacks in one segment. Make a full round of missile attacks in one segment, or 3 times that rate if the missiles are ready. Take one segment of movement, 1 foot per 10 feet of movement rate, 1 inch rather. 1 foot per 1 inch. I always want to read that as 10 feet, don't I? Cast a 1 segment spell or begin casting a longer spell, sure. Spend 1 segment performing any other action that can normally be completed in 6 seconds, drawing a weapon, drinking a potion, activating certain wands, etc. So yeah, there are little things you can pop off if you're out ahead of somebody in the surprise situation. An individual who, due to a reaction bonus, is surprised for fewer segments than the rest of his side can only perform actions D3 through 5 above. So you're not going to be making a full round of melee or missile attacks. During this segment, he is no longer surprised. If you were adjusted ahead of your group based on your dexterity reaction bonus. Similarly, an individual who, due to a reaction bonus, is surprised for fewer segments than the rest of his side cannot be targeted by actions 1 or 2 above. So, both sides are surprised. Some have an advantage because of reaction bonus from their dexterity. Well, the ones that get that bonus on the one side cannot target the individuals who get that bonus on the other side during the segments that he is no longer surprised. So a lot of this matters in regard to being able to target certain individuals on the team. All right. This is 2. This is determining distance. And I'll tell you what, we've gone through surprise, and we're at 40 minutes, so we're going to call it for the day as regard to the topic of the day, the rules retrospective. We'll jump in next time and talk about distancing. Isn't that appropriate for now? Dex would assume more of a twitch reaction. Where would intelligence come into the process of surprise, and what to do? Well, it doesn't. Not by the rules as written for first edition D&D. Intelligence does not affect it, but there's no reason why somebody can't house rule something to say that that's a factor that should come into play. I've always been a fan of, well, let's just say that since starting to mess with the rules more on my own since 3rd edition, yeah, let me mention up front too. I run Creative Mountain Games. It's just a little e-publishing company that I put together some time back to put out some game products under the Open Game License. This year in December will be 20 years since I first started working on Creative Mountain Game stuff. And all that by way of saying that I liked the idea of, in 3rd edition, of certain ability scores being tied to certain types of saving throws. So, yeah, I'm an old fan of 1st edition in the saving throw charts and all of that. But when I saw how they linked Constitution to Fortitude, and boy, it's eluding me now. I haven't played 3rd in a little while. Was it Wisdom tied to will saves? And Dexterity tied to reflex reaction saving throws? Well, I thought there was a case to be made for Strength and Constitution to be tied to Fortitude saving throws, Intelligence and Dexterity to be tied to reflex, as you're saying here, Lexfire, and Will saving throws to be tied to both Wisdom and to Charisma, bringing your will to bear through either ability score. So, pretty neat idea. Oh, yeah, let me think of this. Dungeon Tome. Tomb. I keep saying tome. Dungeon Tomb, I've got to get you onto the list here for the week 7 giveaway. And I think you're in there on the followers. If not, just follow the channel. Anybody who follows the channel and speaks up in chat gets counted in as being eligible for the drawings that we do each week. And this is the first day of the week, but you're in. Like the primary, secondary impact. Yeah, that was the idea. Was you could use either stat to affect one of those 3 saving throw categories, whichever was higher. And in some cases, you'd get a bonus from the one, and then you'd be able to bring the secondary. You could role play a way of convincing to bring the secondary bonus to bear additionally as another modifier. So that was just something I was toying around with the saving throw system that came out of third edition. But here we are talking about first edition. Today was a good show. I think we talked about initiative in particular in regard to surprise. We'll pick back up with distances next Sunday. I want to thank everybody who joined us in the chat stream. And if you're checking this out later, I should change the screen. If you're checking this out later on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like it. If you guys aren't doing anything coming up late May, and many of us aren't, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday Con of Champions, I've got some first edition games I'm going to be running then. Be sure to sign up for Con of Champions and help keep tabletop events afloat during this difficult time, because they're the backbone of a lot of good physical conventions too. And it's very important that they stay in business, if only to keep a bunch of small conventions from having to scramble to figure out a new way to keep track of events and do registration. TJ's a good person, and I think he's excellent. I'm probably dropping the Discord from my games, and I'll just use the Roll20 video and voice chat during these games rather than couple Discord with it, because I used the native voice and video chats on Roll20 last Tuesday, and they work just fine now. So they've fixed whatever errors they had with them. This last set, I'll announce the winner of this charcoal dice set tomorrow. The weekly schedule, of course, Sunday is that rules retrospective in the lower right-hand corner. Monday, we'll do weekly news and giveaway. Weekly news will be discussing in more detail some of the things we'll be dealing with during the week, as well as upcoming events and things to take note of. Tuesday, cartography and world building. Wednesday, Grimwald and general campaign discussion. Thursday, we're just starting to get into crafting and painting on a weekly basis, and I don't know if you can see that over there, but I went and picked up a light to attach to my PVC piping, and I've got a different way of holding the camera up over there through a bendable neck support rather than having it hanging from that PVC, also because anytime you bump the table it shakes up the camera, and that was annoying. Plus I couldn't get it quite as low as I wanted to get it to get the close-ups that I was going to need. The lighting was bad, so all of that was tested out on last Thursday, and some changes were made to make it better for this Thursday. We'll see how it goes. Friday, building virtual tabletop adventures. So it is about adventure building, but specifically with it in mind that these are going to be used for tabletop, for virtual tabletop. In particular, using building them up for Roll20. You can check out the last episode. I did some work with a tower, and I did some work in between with that same tower so that I could have a good jumping off point for this Friday's discussion of how to utilize that. I'm hoping to get better at dynamic lighting between now and then, but at the very least we can talk about bringing tokens, monsters, objects, and other things in and out of the field of vision of the player characters as you're running the adventure, and how to build it in advance so it's ready for that. So it can be done quickly, so people aren't waiting while you're digging around for stuff. Saturday is the cartoon review. We've gone through 7 of the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons animated series. We'll do 2 more because there's 9 on a disc. There's 27 total. We'll do 2 more in the next couple of weeks, and then we're going to switch gears and move over to the next thing, which is Conan the Adventurer, a fun little series from back in the day. Since we do these from a DM perspective, there should be all sorts of fun stuff to pick up on, file the serial numbers off by Crom. See if I can get some of the reflection off of that. Anyway, that's Saturday. Sunday we'll be back to the rules retrospective. We'll talk about AD&D First Edition social distance and counter distancing. Thank you very much. If you're in the chat, I appreciate it. Follow, of course, as always, and speak up for a chance to be in the weekly giveaway. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up or give us a thumbs down. It really doesn't matter. Actually, the algorithms count them both the same. So feel free to comment also. And have a great Sunday. And happy Mother's Day to those of you out there who are mothers or who are going to be spending time with one.